Baik, bertemu lagi dalam Malaysia Memilih pukul 5 petang tadi. Kalau kita cakap mengenai kursi panas di Tenom, di mana sukar untuk kita melihat siapakah calon yang bakal ke depan dalam pilihan raya kali ini, dan kedudukannya juga sebagai salah satu kursi marginal dengan hanya sekitar 1,000 sahaja undi. Perbezaannya pada PRU ke-14 tentu sekali dengan kepelbagaian data-data seperti contohnya pengundi 18, pengundi-pengundi baru. Ini lagi faktor-faktor yang menyebabkan sukar untuk kita memberi orang kata jawapan yang konklusif. Calon manakah yang ketika ini berada di hadapan dalam perlumbaan kempen. Dan untuk itu kita bersama dengan Bridget Welsh, saudari Bridget Welsh. Beliau merupakan penganalisis politik Asia Tenggara yang berpangkalan di Kuala Lumpur. Bridget, hello Bridget.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Welcome to the show, Bridget. Thank you for being with us today.
Greetings from Tanjung Karang.
I'm now referring to your article in your website. Now, you've covered Malaysia. You've covered most hot seats in Malaysia. You spent about 1 month traveling throughout the country, and then based on your travel and your conversation with the people on the street, and especially in the strategic areas, especially in the hot seat areas, you've come to a conclusion that this election is still uncertain, despite only 2 days before the election.
I think what we have two things going on. Number one is that there's a lot of choice for different people on the ground. So there are 3 coalitions, and they're all really fighting very hard to win. In some parts of the country, 4 coalitions are relevant, such as in Kedah. So we see a lot of choice on offer. The second thing that's going on is that Malaysians are making choices in a different way. Previously, they stuck with what they know. Now what we see is they're more willing to take risks, knowing that they can actually have the power to make those choices. And so they're choosing different alternatives. And this is especially true of a third of the electorate, younger voters, who are actually looking at the different options and not following party loyalty to the same degree as the past. So this contributes to high levels of uncertainty. We've seen the campaign in the last few days become much hotter, and more people are going home to vote. There's much more attention to issues. So I think we're seeing a lot of decisions being made in these last few days.
Well, this might not be the most divisive election, comparing to, let's say, election in 2018, but certainly this is the most competitive ones. With the undecided voters, and I'm quoting your research, it says as much as 15 to 20% of the electorate, and this is still remains an open contest to everyone. Now, what are the chances for the underdogs?
Well, it depends on who's the underdog. I think everybody feels that they're a bit of an underdog. BN came into this election feeling that it would win, and now that it's trying to gain more traction. Perka Nasional was seen as not necessarily, going into their first general election. They are also have gained considerable traction and seats, especially among young voters, among Malay voters. And Pakatan Harapan also came in as an underdog, and they have gained some traction in terms of many of their core bases returned. The question for Harapan is how many Malay votes they will get, and especially in some of these close votes, and whether or not vote splitting will work in their favor. Right now, Harapan has the most seats that are safe, but I think that there are a lot of seats that are outstanding, and there are a lot of there's some fierce competition on the ground with all these 3 major coalitions.
And you were saying that Harapan might garner most seats, but would they be able to have enough seats to form a government? And there also, according to your research here, it says that there is possibility for a hung parliament. Now, if a hung parliament situation happens after the 19th of November, what can the rakyat expect?
So I think Malaysia needs to appreciate that it's moved to a situation where coalitions sometimes are formed after elections. We've had 2 hung state assemblies, both in Perak and in Kedah. And what happens is parties were able to come together to work to resolve and form a government. I think that's similarly what's going to happen potentially if things continue as they are nationally. Normally, and the precedent is that the king or the sultan, in the case of the state levels, calls the coalition coalition that has the most seats and gives them the option to form a government. And the question will be how that coalition arrangement is done. This is a peaceful process. It's a process that is actually, based on discussions. I think it shows a sophistication, and I think that there will be effort in Malaysia to form a government quickly if these circumstances are that there are differences. And I think that there are different partners that have worked together before, and they know each other. They've been so I don't expect that this is something that will create instability from the perspective of the country, because it is hung parliaments are quite common. It reflects that people have different choices, and I think we will see Malaysia's leaders try to reach the resolution for a government quickly, and I think with the interest of the people at heart.
You've been studying about Malaysia for more than 20 years now, and then I believe that you understand how the Malaysian thinks, how the Malay Malaysian thinks, how the Chinese Malaysian thinks, and how Indian Malaysians think, and all the other facades and all Malaysians from all around, all backgrounds, be it urban and rural. Now, but the idea of hung parliament is still very new, despite having two states which was in that kind of situation, such as Kedah, for example, as you mentioned. Now, would there be a huge frustration among voters if we cannot form any government, if the political parties cannot form any government after the 19th of November?
Look, I don't think that this will be, if there is a problem to form a government, there will always be frustration. But I do think that, you have partners in Sabah Sarawak who will be very important. I believe that there have been conversations already among different political actors. And as I mentioned earlier, these parties know each other. I think, at this point of time, from the perspective of voters, they need to go out and vote the choices that they are most important, to give their preferred coalition the most bargaining power. And I think we're going to see, I think that we're going to see a situation where it may take, sometimes it may take time, but I think there's also the sense that there will be a lot of pressure, because Malaysia's never had this before, to solve these issues quickly. And I think and to have a government quickly. And I think that, I remain confident in Malaysia's elites to be able to sort of solve, to reach some sort of compromises. And if one coalition is not able to form a government, then other partners will be able to ask to form a government. These things happen all across the world, and it doesn't hurt a country. In fact, it shows the strength of the institutions and the leaders in the country itself.
All right, and you mentioned if a dominant or a party with the most seats cannot form a government, then another political partner or another political party might be able to form the government. Now let's talk about Amno NBN. Yeah, and in your research you say at most they'll get about 45 seats, yeah? And then if that's so, would we see a status quo after election, after PRU15?
Well, I think I think that there are currently They currently have around 30 safe seats, and 45 if you include that lean in their direction. But there's still another 20 seats that no one could even call, so their numbers may go up. So I think that's the first point. The second thing is that I think that the question becomes who can work with whom, and whether or not coalitions are actually cohesive. I think the one problem that UMNO is facing is that its internal divisions have been very much on display nationally, and this has really undermined its performance on the ground, not in traditional areas that UMNO has won. And of course, its leadership has also been questioned. So I think this will challenge the fact that from a perspective of BN forming government compared to the past. There are still leaders who can command the BN's base, but the problem is that has not been the case so far in how the party has been currently managed.
Mm-hmm. Well, elections and political campaign can be emotional, right? Now it's after election or after 19th of November, it's time about getting all Malaysians together, despite all the results which is still uncertain. I would like to ask you this one, I think, most important question. what can we learn from other countries? How do they come together despite all these differences and most importantly, despite all these frustrations? Would you see, do you expect the trust towards political system will go down after the 19th of November? How do you ensure that, how can we ensure that within these 2 days, most Malaysians, most registered voters would want to go out and vote?
I think there is a lot with that question, but let me pick up a few things.
Sure.
Number one, globally, what we see is that coalitions come together for common purposes and common policy programs. I think one of the challenges of Malaysia is that the system is very much driven by personalities. And I think what's going to be an important lesson in timing is whether or not some of these individuals can put their egos aside and focus on common platforms. I think the second issue in terms of looking at what's happening is that I think people are making different choices in where they think they're most comfortable in the political process. One of the important things about a viable, stable coalition is that it represents the diversity of the country. And I think this is something that's going to be very important for any coalition government that forms at moving forward. And number three, I think that, if anything, the decisiveness of the differences in the competitiveness that's on offer really it reinforces the need for every Malaysian to come out and vote, because every single vote will be important, and you lose your voice by not coming out. And I think right now the focus should be less on the elites, but more about what you feel is important and how you want to participate in the political process. Because this election is that competitive, and every single person can make a difference.
Yep, and it is very important, as you said, and you said it well, that any Malaysians cannot lose their voice come 19th of November. Thank you so much, Bridget Welsh. Bridget Welsh is currently the Honorary Research Associate with the University of Nottingham Asia Research Institute Malaysia, based in Kuala Lumpur, bersama kita dalam Malaysia Memilih jam 5 petang tadi, 5 petang ini. Dan sekian saja Malaysia Memilih untuk jam ini. Sebarang cadangan boleh hubungi kami melalui platform sosial media kami. Kami juga akan terus bawakan perkembangan terkini menjelang 19 November di semua platform kami, terutama sekali di platform sosial media. Kami juga akan terus bersiaran di saluran 501. Dan itu sekali malam ini banyak lagi aktiviti-aktiviti kempen yang akan berlangsung untuk menarik keluar pengundi-pengundi untuk keluar mengundi pada 19 November ini, dan juga untuk membantu pengundi-pengundi untuk membuat keputusan yang pada pandangan mereka keputusan yang tepat dan keputusan yang mampu untuk membawa suara mereka ke parlimen. Dan itu sekali kami di Astro juga mahu membantu anda untuk membuat keputusan yang tepat ini menerusi laporan kami. Baik, sekian sahaja untuk jam ini. Saya Syafzan Johari. Kita jumpa lagi.